Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us this morning with our webinar for the BatteryPass-Ready project. Called it Get BatteryPass-Ready so that you can understand what we are planning to do within this project and already planning to support you with a test environment for the battery passport that is due in 2027. Before I start, just a few sentences to me. I'm Johannes Zimbeck. I'm Division Manager at acatech, the German Academy of Science and Engineering. I'm happy to lead you through this webinar today. And the agenda is, as you can see, a little bit of an introduction in the beginning. Afterwards, we will introduce the contents of our project through the different project partners. We will state what they will be doing and how we will work together to provide such a test environment. Then we have a panel discussion, including our supporting partners, associated partners from different industry associations, and a Q&A session with the BatteryPass-Ready experts. You can already ask your questions within the F&A or Q&A part of the Teams that you can see above in your Teams program. So go ahead and ask questions also about anything in the presentations about the project, or later on questions that you want to pose to our experts. So please use the Q&A. If you can see the chat button, please don't use it. We wanted to disable it. It should be disabled, but if you can still see it, please don't use it for any questions. In the end, we will have closing remarks by Dr. Thorsten Brandenburg from the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, that we are glad he will join us today. He's from the founding ministry from this project, so we're really happy to have him here as well. So that's the agenda for today. Before we go a little bit into the survey, into the webinar, please scan this QR code for a little bit of a survey. It will be 3 little questions where you can help us with your current state of play on the battery passport with your background, so that we can understand a little bit better where you are at, where you're coming from, where you want to go. So please use this QR code to give us some information. I'll leave this a little bit on here on the screen before I move on to the next slides and introduce the project in general a little bit before our experts go into the deep dives on the project content. I already see a lot of answers coming in. Thank you so much. We already also crossed the 100 participants bar. So really, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us here. Yeah, so much for the survey QR code. I'll move on and give you a little bit of an impression on what is it all about. Many of you may know the BatteryPass project that ended in March this year, where we had created a lot of content about the battery passport and discussed its details. And we were really happy and glad and proud that we got an additional funding by the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy to work in the BatteryPass-Ready project, where we want to deliver a test system for battery passport readiness to support you with getting ready for the battery passport. So it has a 2-year time frame, started in April 25, so it goes through March 2027. Very important, it's a pre-competitive project still as well to support industry and especially SMEs. So it's not a commercial solution that we're developing here, but it's pre-competitive, very important from our point of view. And the work packages, we will go into detail in the next 1.5 hours. So what's the digital battery passport? Most of you will know that it will be due by February 18th, 2027. It will be required for electric vehicle batteries, light means of transport batteries, that is scooters and so on, and industrial batteries that are larger than 2 kWh. The economic operator who's placing the battery on the market is responsible for the battery passport, but indirectly, of course, the data will also need to be supplied by the suppliers. especially on carbon footprint and so on, for example. So it's a shared responsibility, so to say, and everybody must get ready to really fulfill the regulation. But what's the purpose of DPPs in the EU? Just as a broader background, the technical framework is set in the ESPR, the eco-design regulation, and other legislations also include the DPPs. And if you are aware of the recently published single market strategy of the EU, the DPP will actually become even more important in the coming years. It talks about a data-based single market where the DPP is actually in the center of product legislation and information and dealing with administrative issues about products. So the scope of the DPP seems to grow still. The general objectives that we see with the DPPs, it should drive digitalization in B2B, B2C, B2G, help reduce the burden also of administrative processes. It should be, as a second point, also an enabler of circular economy, and all together we will have more sustainable and transparent value chains through it. So under the line, or bottom line is that we will have the DPP, and it should be more than compliance. It will be a tool to drive digitalization, circular economy, and transparency. Coming back a little bit to what I already mentioned, the BatteryPass project, we've created a lot of content that you can still find available on our website, where we will also actually host the BatteryPass-Ready project. So it's going to be still one web page where you can find the information. There we talked about data, the technical background. We created a demonstrator and assessed the value. And then the natural question was, well, if we build it all together, how do we know the solution actually works? So this is where the BatteryPass-Ready project is coming from, and where we want to go to, combining the results that we had so far into a really workable testing support solution. One point that I still want to make here, and that is complicating things a little bit, of course, is we have a lot of different applications. I already mentioned the major battery categories where the battery passport applies for, but especially industrial batteries are not only one type of application, but many, many different. We have stationary battery systems, we have also redox flow batteries that are among those, and industrial batteries where we have a number of applications like road transport, non-road transport, heavy machinery, or forklifts. So really many different machines or applications with different batteries, and we will be trying to really consider that also in our work. That's where we, though, will need you also to give your feedback on what we've done, and what you need actually from a testing environment. So please go ahead and join us also in the consecutive webinars, and when we will reach out to you for your support on what is your requirements for testing solution. All right, the survey results I will do on a just talk about it. We have a broad scope of the organizations that we have here, economic operators placing the battery on the market, a lot of service providers also in the meeting, but also NGOs, academia, and downstream stakeholders like repurposers and recyclers. From the 32 or 35 people who answered our survey, we have 14 who say they are very familiar with the battery passport, 20 say somewhat, and 1 is not familiar. So as a little bit as expected, you of course already know a little bit about the battery passport. And that's great also for us to have a nourishing discussion with you, what is actually at the center of implementation for the battery passport. About the implementation, 15 people say they're working on a concept, and 7 already say they have a pilot running, while 7 also say there's no, or they're only they're not building on an implementation at the moment. So that is an overview on the survey results. And with that, I will introduce our experts. We will start with Patrick Gehring. He's Deputy Head of Department and Product Owner from Fraunhofer IPK, our long-lasting partner. As I said, please pose your questions in the Q&A feature. But with that, I will hand over to Patrick, who will be talking about the motivation and key objectives of the project.
Thank you, Johannes. Now this slide will be familiar with to many of you, but it helps understanding our project scope a little better. We're working specifically on battery passports as part of the broader Digital Product Passport initiative. What sets batteries apart is that they already have a fairly mature foundation, thanks in parts of the earlier BatteryPass project, which laid out structured content guidance and the data attributes. That's the part on the left, the data side. For batteries, there are specific regulatory requirements, mainly still evolving around carbon footprint, durability, and more. But it's important to understand that the system side, everything on the right, is not battery specific. The DPP system architecture is designed to be harmonized across product groups. So whether it's batteries, electronics, textiles, the underlying technical infrastructure for identifiers, access, and data exchange will be the same. So in BatteryPass-Ready, we're building on battery-specific content from the earlier work, but we're aligning it with a common cross-sector system architecture. That's the core design principle for test environment developing. With that background in place, why do we need BatteryPass-Ready? Well, implementing DPPs across Europe is a highly complex task. When you think about it, you've got automatic interactions between manufacturers, recyclers, regulators, and more, all under high data volume and strict compliance rules. That's a lot of moving parts. Time is another factor. Regulatory clock is ticking. Technical standards are expected by the end of 2025. And data definitions are being defined through delegated acts in parallel. This leads to the third challenge, shifting requirements. Because standardization is still ongoing and because future EU rules will likely expand or adjust data into system expectations, we need a test environment that can adapt quickly. That includes revalidation of data models, updated test cases, and revised interfaces. So the goal of the BatteryPass-Ready is quite clear. We need to build a flexible, scalable test environment where we can evaluate completeness, plausibility, and interoperability, and offer evidence-based guidance to both industry and policymakers. So let's talk concretely. What will the BatteryPass-Ready environment actually do? At its core, it allows stakeholders to prepare their systems for the upcoming digital product passport ecosystem. In some cases, that means simulating how systems would interact in a real distributed DPP setup. For others, especially those still in early stages, it means getting ready. So validating data, understanding system behavior, and testing interoperability in a safe, structured environment. For example, users can upload either generated or real data to check plausibility and completeness. They can test how specific API interactions perform, analyze system-to-system exchanges, and explore different failure cases or edge conditions. In addition, the environment provides guidance based on user stories, like creating passport, transferring responsibilities, updating passport data to reflect the real-world processes. So rather than just being a sandbox, the test environment acts as both a simulator and a readiness toolkit. It gives company and solution providers a chance to explore, validate, and build confidence before entering the live DPP landscape, let's say. Let's dig a little bit into the timeline. This timeline gives a broad overview of the project, but let me just zoom in on where we are right now in mid-2025. At this stage, we're focusing on detailing user stories, which means mapping out concrete interactions that different actors like economic operators will have with the battery passport system. These stories help us understand what needs to be tested, what functionalities matter most, and where support is actually needed. In parallel, we're gathering stakeholder requirements more broadly, not just technical specifications, but also expectations for usability, for example, interoperability and potential integration points with internal systems. And that feeds directly into how we're designing and defining the test environment, its architecture, the types of tested supports, and how results are documented. So looking ahead, we aim to implement a functioning version of the test system by early 2026, followed by an optimization phase later that year. By end of 2026, we want to be in a position where the environment is ready for real-world use with a clear operator model defined. So basically right now, it's all about listening, shaping, and building the right foundation to ensure the system works, not just technically, but also practically. Finally, of course, this is a team effort, and the project structure reflects that. BatteryPass-Ready brings together a group of specialized partners, acatech, Fraunhofer IPK, TU Berlin, and GEFEG as a core team. And each organization brings unique strength. Acatech is in charge of engaging stakeholders, shaping data requirements, and looking at possible operating models for the test environment. And Fraunhofer IPK and GEFEG are handling the system implementation and technical integration, while TU Berlin focus on defining requirements and developing the test functions. What makes this collaboration effective is that it combines technical depth with real-world relevance. So whether it's defining test functions, exploring operating models, or making sense of evolving EU regulations, this partnership ensures that the system we're working on isn't just theoretically, it's practical, implementable, and aligned with the stakeholders. And with that, thank you very much. I will hand over to my colleague.
Thank you, Patrick. We will have answer the questions to anything that we present here, as I said, in the Q&A later on. So please pose your questions in this feature of Teams. But we will continue here now with my colleague Lisa Risch. She's a scientific officer also at acatech, and she will talk about what we will be doing in our work package on stakeholder needs and data requirements.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and a very warm welcome to all of you. Yeah, as Johannes and Patrick mentioned already, at acatech we have mainly two tasks, two working packages. One being the definition of stakeholder needs, and the other one being the identification of the data attribute battery passport data requirements. So what does stakeholder requirements or stakeholder involvement actually means, and how do we want to approach different stakeholder groups? So for us, it's very important to don't create or build a test system that doesn't serve any purpose, but actually this test system shall be designed in such a way that it supports really the different stakeholders that are affected by the battery passport. So in order to actually identify these needs of different stakeholder groups, we partnered up with our associated partners, the associations Bitkom, VDMA, and ZIV. So actually, combining the digital associations, bicycle association, automation, but also the machinery equipment association, to really get close to those who are in touch with battery passports, those who really best know the needs of the implementers and of the users of the battery passport. Then we will install an advisory board to kind of get a broader view on what is going on the political side, but also in standardization organizations. And last but not least, we have supporting partners. And these can be actually all of you. So this is kind of a call for action, because we need all of the battery value chain actors, all of the DPP actors, to address their needs, their requirements for the battery passport, to let us know what actually would help them best as a test system, what they need in order to get ready for the battery passport. And yeah, in order to do so, you can actually contact us. There will be soon a call for action. But also now, if you have questions, if you're interested in getting involved, you can already send us an email, and we are happy to let you know how you can further be involved within the project. As for now, you can already stay in the loop and follow us on LinkedIn. You can also sign up for our BatteryPass-Ready newsletter. And we often get questions about all our resources, also the ones of the previous project, of the Battery Pass project. If you want to access them, they are still available for you on the Battery Pass homepage. And we will soon host also the Battery Pass-Ready resources on this homepage. So if you want to use one of these channels, just scan the link or the QR code and get involved. And with that, I would like to talk about the second topic, about data attributes. Actually, within the previous project, within the Battery Pass project, we identified already the battery passport data, or better said, we extracted them from the battery regulation. And as for now, we want to prepare and update these battery passport data attributes for the test environment. That being said, there are still so many processes going on. There are secondary legislative acts coming, there's standardization going on. All these processes actually still defining some data attributes and also the methodologies that lie behind the data attributes. And how do we want to do that? So actually we have already established a good basis by collecting these data attributes and describing them in the DIN DKI spec 99100. And now we want to prepare them for the test environment. And in order to do so, we first have to also get some definition work done to define what actually does it mean if the data is complete or plausible. But let me first introduce a little bit to the DIN DKI spec 99100 for all of those who don't or who are not familiar with this document so far. So you can find it at the Battery Pass homepage or via the QR code, but also at the board shop or at the standardization organizations. It's a collection of the data attributes and also provides some suggestions, proposals, what we would suggest the users or the implementers of the battery passport to consider. This document is supposed to be a work in progress or a living document. So if you have any suggestions, questions, please go ahead, write us an email, or you can also provide comments or feedback via the DIN1 platform. But it's very important here for us to state that it's not finished business. It's really a document where we are still about to further define some points and also to erase some of the misunderstandings. So what does it actually contain, this data attribute long list we are always talking about? It's a collection of all the data points that are mandatory or also voluntary from our side, that have to be included or can be included in the battery passport, ranging from product data, identifiers, to material composition, to dynamic data as performance and durability data points. Next to the data point, the data attribute itself, we also clarified for each of these points for which category it actually applies, EV, LMT, industrial batteries, which physical unit should be used, the format that can be used, whether it's a static or dynamic data point, and the granularity, the data points that that refer to the individual battery and others that refer to actually the whole battery model. Same for granularity on pack or cell level. And then last but not least, we have the access rights that also differ from data point to data point. Some data points are accessible to the general public, so more or less to everyone. There are data points that are only accessible to notified bodies, market surveillance, and the commission. And there are data points still to be closer defined or better defined that are only accessible to the to persons or to institutions with a legitimate interest in assessing and processing the information. So I said in the beginning that we want to prepare the data points, and by the test environment, the test system, actually check whether these data points are complete and plausible. But what does it actually mean whether data attribute or data attribute list is complete and plausible? So first we have to get a common understanding of what we mean with complete and plausibility. And then in the second step, we have to define how we can actually check the completeness and plausibility via the test system and which data actually we consider. So for completeness, I think it's rather straightforward. So we have mandatory data points, and if these data points are not filled out, the battery passport is not complete. I think for the checking, this is also rather straightforward, at least at first sight. It becomes a little bit more complicated if you include the dynamic data points, but actually have to be updated on a regular basis. And then secondly, also thirdly, we have to talk about the scope. I mean, we can also include voluntary data, of course. And the second question we have to ask ourselves whether we are also able to actually check the completeness of the underlying databases, for example, the technical documentation that underlies the recycled content information or the carbon footprint information. And it becomes a little bit more complicated when we talk about plausibility. I mean, plausibility means actually whether the data point or the value that is entered into the test system makes sense, whether within this context it's a logical, reasonable value. I think for some data points, this is rather easy to check. If we're talking about numerical values, of course, you can establish boundaries. If the value is without a boundary, it's not reasonable. It doesn't make sense. So it's not plausible. But it becomes rather more complicated if we check for connections between data points, correlations between different data attributes. And also we have to consider that some of the data attributes are actually PDFs or just data points that are very difficult to read, or at least at the moment, some of these data points are not machine readable. So we have to see how we can handle this problem. Yeah, and with that, I would like to hand over to our next speaker, or to Johannes first.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And I'll introduce the next speaker. It's Andreas Pelekis. Welcome to you from our new and great partner, GEFEG, who have a lot of background in testing and system building. He's Senior Business Development Manager there, and we'll talk about interoperability and plausibility testing of the battery passport's data and system.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for handing over to me. Yeah, we have the great opportunity to develop most of the technical part of the BatteryPass system. And so I'd like to introduce a little bit on what we are doing here. And don't be afraid, this is not the level I'd like to talk to you, although this is already a very high level picture of what are the components of the battery pass system. So what I'd like to show you first are what are the involved parties. Yeah, so we have on the one hand side the interested parties. These are those organizations or people who really want to use the information from the battery passes later. The question is, how do they get the information? They use the passport services. The passport services are operated by the economic operators or by the central system from the European Commission. The second part of the central systems is the registry, where all the batteries and battery passports have to be registered. So somehow the information about the battery passports have to get to those services or to this registry, and this is done via APIs, so via machine-readable formats being transferred from the economic operators to the other systems. And the economic operators are, in this case, at the complete life cycle of the battery, yeah, from the manufacturing, the importers, during the use, for instance, if a workshop has to maintain a battery up to the end of the life of a battery when a battery gets recycled. This complete system needs to be very reliable, and in order to achieve this, it is already designed to have backup services by third parties involved. So we have connections to them as well. And if you have a complex system like this, you quite fast get to a question of how can quality be assured and how can things be certified. So we might have something like a certifier involved. So we have many different parties in the system. And so the question, how does a battery passport test system work in this environment? And the idea is what can be tested. Yeah? So one of the test cases is for sure the conformity and interoperability of the different APIs of the exchanges between the computer systems. So interaction becomes very important, and for sure what was already mentioned, the data itself, the quality and the plausibility of the data being transferred. So we have a quite huge test environment, including all those different systems and parties. One important aspect of this project is that the services being performed by the interested parties are not part of this project. So we really focus on the data exchange between the economic operators, the registry, and the backup system. So the system sits really in the middle, connected to the different APIs of the attached systems. It will have a user interface, and it will have two main components, one for doing all of the process-related checks, the API calls, the tasks, the test cases, and so on, and the other component focusing on the data quality, on consistency, and so on. So when we are using this system in the future, it will be performing different test scenarios, test cases. One is attaching a real economic operator system. So if you want to check in an onboarding phase, for example, if the economic operator system follows all of the expectations and the interoperability will be achieved once getting operational, it means that the other systems, like the registry and the backup systems, need to be emulated. The same is true if you want to check the implementation of a backup system. In this case, the system of an economic operator will be emulated as well. So in theory, you could do the same with the registry to emulate the backup system and the economic operator, but this is not in scope of this project to test the registry itself. So let's summarize. What does it mean for the BatteryPass project? Yeah, so the test systems are needed in order to get the interactions between the different systems tested and to get confidence in the system's functions. The validation assures that we have data clarity and interoperability because we have this very complex system of many participants in the complete environment. The emulation of the different components allows us to don't have a moment where we need to wait for others to implement things. So by emulating the different components, everyone can start testing as fast as possible when his system gets ready. So it leads to many different benefits for the different stakeholders. So we have the early awareness of the errors, the interoperability check for the solution providers. We have a base for conformity assurance for administration, research to practice transfer for research, and just for example for the recyclers. This way it can be assured to have reliable data. So summarized, the battery passport-ready system is a catalyst for trust for the data-based decisions and for a sustainable battery passport system with added values for all of the parties involved. Thank you, and I'd like to hand over.
Right. Thank you so much, Andreas, for your insights. And we will move on to the last part of the introduction of our project, to Duan Efe, who's at TU Berlin. He's a scientific officer within the Department of Quality Management. And we're so happy to also have this group on board in our project, supporting in our work. And yeah, Duan will talk about the requirements or identifying the requirements for the test system through user stories. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and also thank you very much, Andreas. So Andreas already gave us some important insights on how the test environment will be structured and what relevance the test environment holds for stakeholders. And now I would like to give you a short introduction on how we want to make sure that all relevant requirements are captured as early as possible in the development process of the test system. And this, of course, is particularly important because we have to make sure that the requirements are fitted to the actual stakeholders' needs. And of course, we are facing a tight time frame, so this also makes this very important. So to make this possible, we are working on user stories that will not only help us to derive requirements, but also to identify possible pain points and error scenarios for the user of the test system. By creating these user stories, you want to be able to clarify relevant process steps and as well as reveal possible dependencies and failure potentials, which then, of course, have to be taken into account when developing the test system. So what are user stories for us in this project? Well, academically speaking, user stories would be a written description of a user's intention and his benefit of a certain process, but we adapted this definition slightly to fit our approach in this project. So we want to represent the user's point of view, but also leave room to consider certain challenges from a systems or process-oriented perspective. And this, of course, will help us guide the system. The definition, the design of the system. So here on the right side on the slide, you can see some relevant user stories which we are currently working on. And of course, we will keep this list updated when regulatory requirements become more clear in the near future. And some of the user stories I can point out are, for example, the authentication process. Questions like, how do I make sure that I'm allowed to register a battery passport with the EU registry, and which data is needed for this process, and what information is needed for this process are questions that need to be answered. And of course, the actual registration of the battery passport, questions like, how does the registration actually work, what data is required, and how do I send this data, how do I receive confirmation, need to be addressed. Of course, the user stories presented here are only a initial selection. When the regulatory requirements and thus the technical constraints will become more clear over time, we will gain a deeper understanding of the processes, and extending this list and adjusting it will be possible. So in the following slide, I would like to show you a brief user story, which is called Creation of Battery Passport. And for the purpose of this webinar, it is shortened to the most necessary steps. Of course, all user stories must be broken down to the smallest detail in order to obtain relevant information about the process and to be actually able to analyze it. So the field that you can see represents the view and the actions of the economic operator. In order to create a battery passport, the economic operator must first collect all relevant data along the value chain of its batteries. So this could include technical specifications, material compositions, production details, maybe information about recycling, and so on. Once all the data has been collected, the economic operator must know in which data format and in which form this battery passport data must be put together to actually form a battery passport. And finally, the economic operator is obligated to provide his battery passport in some form. This means that the battery must not only be registered after it has been created, which as a step is not included in this user story, as it will have his own user story later on, but the battery passport must also be made available. So, for example, market surveillance institutes or other notified bodies can actually have access to the battery passport. So what are the possible pain points from the user's perspective here? Of course, the most relevant aspect here is clearly that the created battery passport might be invalid without a subsequent validation process. There might be a lot of different pain points, but right now we want to focus on this specifically. So when creating a battery passport, the economic operator must therefore ensure that the battery passport has been completed in accordance to the rules and is completed. And this, for example, can be an issue if the regulation determines that different types of batteries may have to contain different data in the battery passport. As you can imagine, this can very highly increase the risk of incomplete battery passports. Another possible error is that the data entered into the battery passport is not according to the requirements of the EU Commission. So there might be some certain implausibilities within the data set. And Lisa and Andreas already talked about this, that these are the things that have to be checked and they need to be right. So without a validation process, these kind of errors can easily go unnoticed and may cause legal issues later on. So this is actually the point where the test environment comes into play. The economic operator should be enabled to examine his battery pass via the test environment. So basically all he has to do is provide access to his battery passport, so the test environment, the battery pass can interact with the test environment. Within the test environment, it should be then possible to check the battery pass for completeness or to check the data set for plausibility. At the end of the process, the system, of course, generates a report. And this report should provide targeted feedback so the operator knows exactly what data needs to be corrected. Well, then what are the benefits of the test environment? So first of all, it provides an automated validation process, which depending on the technical capabilities of different companies might save time and reduce cost, especially for companies that don't have the means for internal quality control. And detailed reports, including the number of faults, the type of faults, or for example, whether a value of a data point is missing or whether it's formatted incorrectly, and of course the location of the fault will be available in detailed reports along the validation process. So as digital product passports are an evolving topic, regulatory requirements are changes in regulatory requirements are very likely. So this might have an effect of the data to be included in a battery passport. And of course, the test environment therefore will make sure that the battery passport is always tested against the latest data schema. Thank you very much.
Dorn, for showing us what we are planning to do with the user stories in this project, which is really important to get an idea on the requirements for our test environment. I want to use this opportunity to remind you that you can pose any questions and also rate the questions other people have asked in the Q&A section of Teams. So please go ahead there, and the experts that will be now talking in the panel, but also replying to questions later, will be taking those that are upvoted the most. So go ahead and look at those questions posed there. But with that, I will hand over to Lisa once again, who will guide you through this panel and the Q&A section. So Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Johannes. Yeah, I'm very happy to welcome 3 of our project associates. Daniel Patzner from VDA, the German Association of the Automotive Industry. He is responsible for national, European, and international standardization for the electromobility and alternative drivetrains. Then, second, welcome Richard Merkel, VDMA, Machinery and Equipment Manufacturing Association in Germany. He is consultant for technical affairs and standardization. Welcome, Richard, and welcome, Sebastian Krassow. He's at ZIV, the German bicycle industry, responsible officer for technology and standardization. So, welcome to the 3 of you. Very glad that you could join this webinar today. Well, first of all, I'd like to talk with you about challenges for your associations, challenges for the industry. I'd like to start with you, Daniel. What do you think are the main challenges that you see from your association's point of view when implementing the battery passport?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for the question and for this excellent organization of this webinar here. And I'd like to point out that there are actually several issues that we as the German automotive industry see when it comes to risks for applying the battery passports. So there are several ones. I would like, however, to draw your attention to the 3 major issues that we might see from the automotive perspective. And the first one is harmonization of regulations. Yeah, so this is a huge issue that we see from the automotive industry, that not only there are several different regulations on European level that have, well, digital product passports or the battery passport in scope, but not only that, but further, they also are not always aligned to each other. And to give you just one example, we see that with regards to the data attributes for the battery passports, we have on the one hand side the European batteries regulation defining a whole list of data attributes for the battery passport, but on the other hand, there is also, for instance, the RED III, a renewable energy directive on European level, which also talks about some points for the European battery passports and defines some additional data points here. And this leads to very much confusion within our industry, I would say, and makes it not really easier to imply such things. Yeah, this is the first point. The second one that I would highlight is the clarification of responsibilities. I think we've heard that now throughout your very detailed introduction here in the webinar. However, I would like to go into detail a bit more on this as well. I think the major question here is who will be responsible for the up-to-dateness of the battery passport throughout its life cycle. Yeah, to give you an example here, what, for instance, do we do if a recycler does any changes to the status of a product, let's say a battery, and how will the economic operator be then informed of such changes to its product or to its batteries? Those are questions that we certainly need answers to. And finally, my third and last point is the necessity of having clearly defined data attributes for the battery passport. I mean, there are now certain initiatives, but from the legislative side, it is still not 100% clear to us what are the exact data attributes that we need to provide, and more specifically on how exactly do we have to provide such data attributes. I mean, the one thing is to write down data attributes, and the other thing is to exactly guide us how to provide such data attributes. And this is a thing where we, in really some of those data attributes, see the need to be more specific in describing the parameters on how such data attributes are to be delivered. And with that, I'd say that's the most important issues that we currently see. Just like I outlined, there are several more, but for the sake of this webinar here, I'd like to draw your attention to those three major ones. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Daniel. I could hear a lot of lack of harmonization, lack of clarification. So Stefan, how do you see it from your point of view, from the bicycle industry's point of view?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, and thanks to everyone for this great introduction and with all the details. So yeah, from the perspective of the bike industry, I think we are not so far away from the automotive industry. So we share the same, lot of the same challenges. One I think we all share is the open regulatory questions that are still not defined. There are many question marks. But I don't want to be so, just to repeat the ones that Daniel said. So we want to go more into the bicycle industry and what is more specific for LMT batteries and for the bike industry. So we have a specialty that not all our vehicles, the bikes, are connected. So, and this makes it very hard to fulfill the requirements, especially for the dynamic data. So we have OEMs that produce bikes. The OEMs are responsible for the data quality, for the data updates. They are responsible for the battery pass, but the battery is in a product which they don't have access to anymore. So they sell the bike, and sometimes, or hopefully, they go back to a dealer where they get their service, and this would be an opportunity to update the data in the battery passport. But we are not sure if this will happen. When will it happen? So the requirements of data of the update cycles, or in general, the dynamic data fields are one of the biggest hurdles for our industry, because the product, there are some that are live connected all the time, but these are very few. Also with this, also as Daniel mentioned, the responsibilities. So we have then dealer doing something on the battery, we have recyclers, we have in the future repair shops that change the battery or the status of the battery. So how do we deal with this? And then in addition, we have an industry that is, have very much SMEs. It's a fragmented market, and this means also the level of digitalization across the industry is very different. So we have big players, some with an automotive background. They have capacity to implement the battery passport, the IT infrastructure. But we have also a lot of SMEs that they come from a mechanical bike world, and now have to deal with things like a digital battery passport and so on. This difference within the industry is a challenge for us to implement the battery passport and all. So this, and of course, we have to look at the cost. So battery passport is associated with high fixed costs, meaning if you have lower volumes, the costs rise unproportionally. So this would be, our main challenges, to sum it up. So we have specifics, and there are regulations that are nearly impossible for us to fulfill. So especially on the data fields.
Yeah, again, like many open questions regarding the legal requirements. Richard, what's your viewpoint, and also perhaps looking towards the SMEs? What do you think?
Yeah, what Sebastian already mentioned is also a very critical point in the mechanical and plant engineering field, because here in our association we have about 18% of SMEs, and here often we are talking about, of course, we have companies with hundreds and thousands of employees, but we also have really small companies with perhaps 10 people. More than the half of them are related to each other, and maybe one student or a trainee, and here we directly have the second point, which is difficult for many of our members, is the potential complexity of the resulting system. It had to be, this includes the implementation as well, the application. We are talking about a form of automation system. It had to be as simple as possible. That's often very difficult. We have many SMEs. Their daily business is to manufacture small parts or something like that. They just using their computer for some emails, etc. But they have not the opportunity or the resources to implement such a possible, in quotes, possible complex system. And if we look, also a point Daniel already mentioned, if we look at the regulations, unfortunately, it seems that it gets more and more complicated due to many different regulations, that they are not very coherent to each other. So, we need to see. That's the different, the two main topics, the different sizes, the heterogeneous area of the plant engineering sector, and the potential complexity of the system.
Yeah, thank you very much. But I think we also said in the beginning, or when we talked beforehand, they're not only challenges. We are often talking about the challenges, and I think it was you, Richard, who said there are also chances, there are also possibilities that come with the implementation of the battery passport. So to give the ball directly back to you, what are these chances, possibilities, and what do I, as industry player, what do I have to do to use them?
First of all, I think there is a very imbalance in the whole discussion. We are often just talking about the requirements and resources we need, but we are forgetting to talk about possibilities and chances to make perhaps a new business case. And if I look back in the past, I'm in the mechanical and engineering sector since about 20 years, and the need for a continuous flow of information has already always existed. This wish was already there. Of course, it's not very nice to say, okay, the trigger point, the push is now the regulation, but that's okay. It is a form of push, and now we can make something very great through the whole life cycle of a product and its formations. What can we do? Yeah, there are many points. First of all, inform yourself. And that means extern and about the ministries or the EU Commission. Also ask many questions intern in your company. What is the current stage of our standardization work? How digital are we in our processes and in our data? What does my master data looks? I know master data is a term, nobody likes it. And to increase the quality of master data always takes much time and resources, but it is necessary. And if you look how, also important question is, how advanced are my suppliers? Talk with your suppliers, how far are they with their digitalization, and do they already know something about the DPP, the Digital Product Passport? Because I think if I look in the VDMA and talk with our members, I often see, yes, sometimes smaller, sometimes bigger gaps of informations. So it's important, inform yourself, internal and external.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I think there were some key words that I would directly hand over to you, Stefan, talking about digitization, about new business models, but also like the supply chain. I think these are topics that are also, yeah, main topics within the bicycle industry. Perhaps you can just talk a little bit about that and about the chances and, yeah, opportunities that you see.
Yes, and also I like to stress out that we should focus on the chances and opportunities to make this. I mean, we have to do it anyways, so let's make it good. Let's make it in a way that we all have a value out of it, and not just do it to put like an arrow behind it and then forget about it. So let's take this as a chance, and I see the biggest chance will be to use this battery passport as a catalyst for digitalization within the industry in general. Also because it is like the blueprint for upcoming DPPs that are that are on the way and that will come in some future. Specific for the bike industry, I think it helps us to develop new business models with the data we have, and we can aggregate. We can enhance services. So, for example, when we know about the state of health of the battery, we can inform the user. We can make them offers for servicing their bikes and get them to the dealers. And of course, the circularity aspect of it. So we all fight or compete for the raw materials of the batteries. So the more we keep inside our industry, or in general use as much as we can of the raw materials through recycling. This helps. Also, it will help us to increase or at least meet the required collection rates that are necessary to get the batteries back and then reuse or recycle them. Whatever. And one important point, I think also more specific for the bike market, is it will enhance the transparency of price calculation at the end of the. Often now we have leasing contracts, so at the end of the leasing, if you know more about the battery state of health in general, it will enhance the transparency on the price calculation, because battery is a big part of the value of an e-bike. So,
yeah, thank you, Stefan. Yeah, from bike industry to automotive industry, Daniel, what's your answer to this question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe I want to say that first of all, we as Germans, we might show the tendency sometimes to, like stress risks and problems over chances and opportunities. And with that being said, I just wanted to highlight that the German automotive industry is absolutely committed to the digital product passports and to the digital batteries passport. Yeah, I think it's important to clearly point out what the current inaccuracies and potential risks might lead to. But on the other hand, we clearly need to point out that there are several advantages and chances that we need to take with the digital product passports and with the digital batteries passport. And my colleagues already mentioned the most important ones, but maybe besides digitalization, one more that I would like to highlight is the point of circular economy that the digital product passport pays into. Yeah, and we as the German automotive industry are striving for the circular economy, and I am 100% convinced that enabling the digital battery passport is a very promising way to enable a circular economy also within our industry. And we should take that opportunity. And one last remark, I also don't think we should take it only we should not see it only as fulfilling those requirements set to us in different EU regulations. I mean, that's kind of the must do that we have. But on top, I think there is also some voluntary work that we can do that goes even beyond the required points in the regulation. For us, it's not just fulfilling regulations, but it's also an intrinsic project that we want to follow as the automotive industry, to follow the digital product passport and the batteries passport.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. Actually, I would like to end on this positive note, but still I'd also like to consider the questions that came up in the chat. And I think many of these questions, of course, are connected with the legal requirements. Some are very basic, but still I'd like to ask you, who is actually the economic operator and who is responsible for the battery passport? And I think, yeah, from automotive to bicycle industry to VDMA, I think there are different models that might also be possible. So perhaps if you could all just answer this question shortly for your respective industry. Perhaps, I think, Stefan, in your case, it's quite...
So I just start. In our case, it's quite complicated because the economic operator can sometimes be the OEM that assembles the whole bike, or sometimes could be the supplier that supplies the battery. So it depends. As a rule of thumb, the name you see on the battery is the one that is responsible for it in most of the cases, but it could be that you have a bike manufacturer that buys the whole drivetrain, meaning the motor engine, gearbox, and of course the battery, which is then labeled with the supplier. So then the supplier is responsible for the battery passport. But often you have the bike manufacturer or OEM that specify the battery pack, have it made to their specifications. And in this case, the economic operator is the OEM, meaning the bike manufacturer, or the name you see on the bike. He is then the one who is responsible for the battery passport and the data. But of course, it's you need the data from all the suppliers. So it's not you are responsible, but of course you rely on the data from suppliers.
Yeah, and apparently easy question, but still not that easy. Daniel, I hope for you it's easier.
No, unfortunately not at all. I mean, at first glance, absolutely right. This question seems to be easy, but if you dig deeper in it, it might get not so easy to answer the question precisely. And this is also one of the points that I mentioned in the beginning of my talks. This is one of the data attributes that we find that is maybe at the first glance clear, but not if you dig deeper in it. I mean, for us at first glance, it seems to be that the responsible economic operator is the OEM, so the car manufacturer. Yeah. But such responsible economic operators can change over the life cycle of such products. Yeah. And who will then be responsible if we have such changes? Just the example that I laid out earlier today in my presentations. So these are questions that we are highly concerned with and where we believe we still need some more guidance and clarification on maybe also what's the viewpoint of the European Commission on who will they need as responsible economic operator in that case. Yeah. So yeah, in summary, it seems to be clear at first glance, but if we dig deeper to it, it's getting more complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, Richard, you want to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm the third in the round who say the same. It seems a very simple question, but also for us in the VDMA, it's difficult. We have, for example, the manufacturer, we have the distributor, we have the installer. It depends what, in the end, the Commission defines as the economic operator. It's not easy to answer. It depends on, here we are talking about the batteries, and we have some better experts like Sebastian and Daniel, but it also depends on the product. Yeah, it seems to be an easy question, but it is not so.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I think with this, I would like to also open the panel to our other speakers. So if you have further questions, please just go ahead and ask them. But I think there's one question that might actually also be a question that you could answer concerning the up-to-dateness of the battery passport data, specifically the dynamic data points. I think there were quite some discussions in the VDA about that. So Daniel, if you want to share your insights on this, but also Johannes, I think you have some background information concerning the up-to-dateness. So please go ahead if one of you want to contribute to this question.
Johannes, if you want to, you can start. I'd like to give the floor to you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's a really important topic that has been simmering since the beginning of the BatteryPass project even. What about dynamic data? So I think it has to be looked at differently for the different applications. From what I heard from also Commission is that there will be most likely no clear definition of what up-to-date means in the end, or no guidelines for it. At least it is, and that means that proportionality. So the data points that you have available, you have to look at it and what makes sense. So, for example, the state of health value does not make sense to be updated every day because it doesn't change that fast at all. Other values may be required to be updated a little bit more often, depending on the use case that you have underlying it. So that's maybe not the most satisfying answer in that regard, but it depends, so to say. And I've seen one additional question regarding batteries without a BMS. So what about dynamic data for them? So my understanding is, but that is something I think we really need to clarify also further in the ongoing project, that with the standardization M579 that is still ongoing, the standardization request states that some of the data only need to be provided if no external equipment is needed. Meaning that if you don't have a BMS and can provide the data, you maybe don't have to provide it. But that's, as I am talking about it, that's a couple of corners that you have to go around to really describe what is required. And I don't think that's really transparent. Let's call it that way. So I would appreciate a clarification, a guidance actually on what is required, because we've heard from so many people here today that their partners or their members in their associations just need this clarity. So that's what I would talk to that, but maybe Daniel has something to add upon. No, he's shaking his head.
So, okay, but again, we're talking about clarification, and I'd like to pick this up. There was another question concerning the access rights. Where do we stand? Is there a clear definition of who are these persons or entities that are supposed to have a legitimate interest to access or to, to change data? Do you know what the current status concerning this question is? Looking into the pen, I think, Johannes, you probably know it. So
Well,
just go ahead.
We're waiting for the delegated act, right? But I think it's time for 6 months before the battery passport being required, and that's really a close call, so to say. So also there, I think a little bit more clarity, more ahead of time would help really to get the system set up. Also for other organizations to prepare, right? Because maybe your classification as an interested person is not granted, or it is granted. So there will be discussion about that as well. It contains a lot of IP, so the composition of the battery and so on. So who will be able to see that is a crucial question about it. So really also there a call to, I don't know, action, or a call for clarity, let's call it that way, and for time to discuss it as well. That's what I would pose or answer to that question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Johannes. I'd like to shift a little bit away from the legal requirements and the data attributes towards the project itself, and also the topic of interoperability. There were many questions about how do we work together with standardization organizations, how do we work together with other projects, consortia such as Catena-X. Perhaps, Patrick, you could say a few words towards these questions.
Yes, I can try. So of course, as you maybe remembered from the BatteryPass project before, we aim, of course, to work closely with everybody who can help us. The industry is quite well covered here with our associations, VDA, VDMA, and ZEV. Additionally, we are just in the process of setting up our advisory council, where we, of course, invite representatives from standardization, academia, research to shape us, build our strategy. And we're in the process of, very important for us, of course, the results of the JDC24, where we aim to have a direct exchange there.
Okay. Thank you very much, Patrick. Perhaps if you're already speaking, can you just drop a few words concerning interoperability and the question, how can I actually connect my solution with the test system? Also, Andreas, of course, if you want to add on this, go ahead.
Yeah,
and is it free of charge?
I guess Johannes mentioned earlier, right? It's a pre-competitive project, so we're not building, or we won't be funded to build the commercial solutions. We're building prototypes. and the prototypes will be to some extent, of course, publicly available. And in parallel, we are defining on how a commercial operating model could look like. Like what would an operating company need to have that as a service for you to connect. Regarding how to connect to the system, of course, we will define APIs to do so. We heard some of Andreas already that we, of course, emulate the real-world systems. So with your economic operator software, you will mimic the interaction between the real-world registry provided by the European Commission. Andreas, do you want to add something to that?
No, it's exactly like you said. So yeah, the result of this project is first to assure that the test system in this complex world of participants is able to fulfill exactly the idea of being able to do onboarding and testing of all of the participants. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Andreas. And with that, I would like to thank all our panelists and hand over again to Johannes, who will share the last information with you.
Thank you so much also to our panelists for taking the time and for being here and sharing your insights. Here are the QR codes again, where you can reach out to us for the moment. So as I said, we're on LinkedIn. We have the BatteryPass-Ready newsletter where we will update you and reach out, and as well the ongoing BatteryPass website where we will add resources also from this BatteryPass-Ready project in the coming months. So stay tuned on all those channels and we will keep you updated. Thank you so much for joining us. Really glad to have you here. Give us your feedback if you like also through our channels. But stay tuned and see you soon.